I also asked Marvin Odum about the White House's 6-month ban on deep water drilling, what it means for people along the Gulf Coast, his company's bottom line, and people across the country as well. Here's that part of our discussion.
Well, if it stays in place for 6 months, there's no question in my mind we will start to lose equipment out of the Gulf of Mexico, which means we'll lose jobs, we'll lose rigs. And that already has had a significant impact, frankly, and it will continue to have a significant impact. Part of the problem here, John, is you may say if the moratorium ends in 6 months, what's the impact? The bigger question is, do we have any certainty around when it will end? Because, a rig company may keep its equipment sitting there for several months idle, even though it generates something on the order of $1 million a day when it's working. But if you don't have any concept of really when the moratorium does end, they almost have no choice but to start to move that equipment out of the Gulf of Mexico.
And if it goes, it's gone for a period of time, anywhere typically from a year to 18 months, isn't it?
No, that's right. I mean, you understand that these large pieces of equipment have to go under long-term contract for it to make sense. It's expensive, actually, to move from one country to another. And so getting those in place, getting the contracts in place, it's usually several years, actually, before a rig would return.
It's easy for people along the Gulf Coast to understand why this moratorium is having an economic impact. But what about in other parts of the country? If the industry stays shut down, are we going to see a reduction in the production of oil from that area? And might that eventually result, perhaps in the next 9 to 12 months, in an increase in gasoline prices?
Well, I think you can draw the lines pretty directly between the two. In terms of a U.S. supply, the Gulf of Mexico supplies about 30% of our oil. It generates something on the order of 150 to 200,000 jobs. So it's a very significant economic benefit to the country. Now, oil is, as we all know, it comes from reservoirs which are a depleting asset, and you have to replenish that. And so if we stop drilling from an area that already supplies 30% of our oil, that clearly creates a gap on energy that we're supplying to ourselves. We become more reliant on international supplies of energy, and ultimately that reduces the amount of energy supplied in the world, which is where the price impact comes into play.
By the way, just a little bit more on this rapid response system. It's going to be pre-positioned in the Gulf. It may take a year or two to get it all together. Very similar technology to what BP is using right now on the Macondo well, but it would certainly put those assets in the area so if something else were to happen, they'd be able to react to it very quickly as opposed to developing a containment system over the course of 3 months.